what was going on internally with me was very secret. I didn't share it with my husband. I didn't share it with friends. I shared bits and pieces with my sister. But I felt incredibly alone.
Why does the world act like alcohol is the answer, even while it is creating problems of its own?
On the Alcohol Myth podcast, we pull back the curtain so you can see what's really going on with alcohol and what life could be like without it.
We are coaches trained in This Naked Mind and effective liminal psychology who fell for the alcohol myth for decades. Now we help people take back control of their lives by changing their relationship with alcohol from the inside out.
You don't need to wait for a rock bottom. You don't need more willpower. You just need a new way to understand what you are feeling and why you are reaching for that next drink.
So let's dig in. Welcome to the Alcohol Myth podcast, where we debunk the myths, the lies that alcohol has been telling us for our entire lives. And today we are doing something special. We are getting to know one of your co-hosts on the Alcohol Myth podcast, the lovely, the talented, the passionate, the beautiful Ellen Biggs is going to share her story with her journey through alcohol, where it all started, where it went, and with the hope that you'll hear something in her story that will resonate for you. And let's just get to know Ellen a little bit better. Ellen, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm a little nervous. I'm feeling a little vulnerable, but also excited. And I've never fully done this before, like on a camera recorded. So let's see.
Yeah. I felt I felt nervous when I was in the hot seat last time, but you have a wonderful story that I know that people are going to benefit from. So, Ellen, when you think back to where it all started for you as it relates to alcohol, I mean, what were your first experiences like?
So I go back to high school. And it's kind of funny because I was, a proverbial good girl, right? Like I got good grades, I followed the rules. I definitely a rule follower still to this day. And I can remember my best friend at the time, like starting to go to parties and starting to drink and starting to smoke even. And I was so like aghast, I was just like, this is not good. She's going down a bad path. I remember I gave her so much crap about smoking. She did stop smoking. But the alcohol piece, like I started to get invited to some of the parties she was getting invited to. And then that was kind of like, that felt interesting. And then I went to one of them and I didn't drink. And I remember taking a beer from the keg and walking around with this beer, but not drinking it because it was like, yuck, I don't want that, but like little by little, I think I just started to look around and see like, okay, this is kind of the ticket to entry to this more adult kind of feeling, a little bit more of a cool crowd, a little more, I don't know, belonging. And so I just slowly started drinking to fit into that scene. And then, I think I probably liked the way it made me feel. I was kind of shy and, I'm like a good student, quiet girl in high school. And, it loosened me up a little bit. It made me a little bit more confident, maybe. Yeah. And that's just kind of how it started. And I would say I was a pretty regular drinker in high school for the kids that drank in high school, I mean, I wasn't like super crazy, but I also like I took to it, like I drank pretty much from the time I started pretty much every weekend. I did have some guardrails in place. Like I was a good student. Cared about my grades. I was on the volleyball team, which there was a girls team and a co-ed team. So it was 2 seasons of the year and we always had Saturday morning practice. So I usually would only party on Saturday night. So it was like one night a week. And I would, party pretty hard on that day, but I did feel like there were like guardrails in place, and yeah, and that's kind of how it started. And I definitely got that belonging I wanted. I got a group of friends. It was mostly good, and I think about the guardrail because I think this has come up with me quite a bit in my story. because when I went to college, kind of a similar thing. I drank on the weekends, but not during the week because I was, good student. I cared about my grades. Um, and then I went to Spain for my junior year in college. And, first of all, it was legal to drink there, and everybody drank a little bit. Like it was very common to just have a beer with dinner or something. And so there was always opportunities to drink. And I think that was the first year where I started to drink pretty regularly, like daily, when I was 20. And then, more heavily often during that time too. And again, it gave me belonging, it gave me acceptance, it loosened my tongue speaking Spanish. It was just, I saw it as a fun, positive thing, really through, through college. But I did, after college, there were indications already at that point that I maybe, was drinking a little bit more than everybody else.
Could you say more about that? Like, so when you think about the first time that you started to notice that maybe this isn't like, maybe I'm not drinking like everyone else around me, like what are some of the thoughts that were going through your head? Or do you remember like a particular instance, what was going on in that season of your life?
Yeah, I think, I had a year in college where I met this girl who liked to drink a lot also. And it went from being like a weekend drinking to like, let's go out on Thursday, let's go out on Wednesday, So it was just, and my roommate at the time, she wasn't really much of a drinker. So it was like, there was a little cognitive dissonance already then. Like, I thought I was having more fun and she was a little bit boring, but it was also a little bit like, wow, I'm drinking a lot. Like, um, and then I think like I had a couple of years between college and graduate school where I was a little bit lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a lot of guidance. Um, I was a typical, 70s and 80s latchkey kid. My parents were like the first ones in our neighborhood to get divorced. So there was a lot of like figuring things out on my own, you know? And then, and so my sister and I did a lot of that. And then in my early 20s, my dad had remarried to this woman who was pretty horrible, and my mom was starting to date for the first time. And I can remember, that was the first time I sort of started to drink at people. Like my sister and I would get pissed at, my dad's wife or my dad or my mom's boyfriend. And we would, sit around and like drink at them. Um, I think I also, I started at that time probably using it more. So there was like the anger piece, but like also boredom or confusion, like worry about who I was, what I was going to do, my future. I started to realize that having a few drinks would make a lot of those feelings dissipate, and I could just have fun and just enjoy myself, and it would quiet a lot of those questions. And then ultimately, I got my act together. I went to graduate school, which is where I met my husband, and I got my first like real job. And graduate school wasn't again another guardrail because like good girl, rule follower, does likes to do well in school. So I did all, that was a priority for me. I still drank, but I was the proverbial work hard, play hard. Like I will, I was very responsible, I was never the drinker that people had to worry about or carry home or would pass out at the bar. Which I realize now, I think really led to like the trajectory of my drinking because I always looked like I was in control. I always gave the impression that I had things together. And I liked that. Like I valued that. I got validation from that like I had it all under control. But because that was so important to me, and because I was slowly unraveling, as my drinking progressed, like it didn't allow me to talk about it with anyone or share it with anyone because I was so afraid of like not having control, not being perceived as someone who was responsible and the good girl.
Was there a particular moment or time in your life where it went from like, oh, this this alcohol is giving me this like sense of accomplishment and this it's like the Swiss Army knife substance, right? Where I can like drink at problems and relieve boredom and express frustration and also relax and also, work hard, play hard. So
Mhm.
is there a particular moment or a time or a season of your life where that started to shift for you into something that was like, this isn't so good? Because it sounds like even through grad school, like it still at least looked like it was under control, but it sounds like at that point you were starting to kind of ask questions. So take me to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I had inklings, but I was still very much in it. Like, I mean, and we've talked about this before. I got married at a winery in Napa. Like, I worshiped at the, booze altar. Like, I loved my wine. I liked beer. I was never really a cocktail girl. It was mostly like wine and champagne and beer. Um, I think when it first started being a problem for me was when I had my first child and I worked for a while. But then after about a year, when she was about a year old, I ended up leaving my job. I was really conflicted. It was a very stressful, lot of travel job, and I was away from her a lot, and I didn't like that. And my job kind of changed at the time to something that I didn't really like. So it was like the perfect storm for me saying, you know what, I'm gonna take a break from this. I'm gonna try being a stay-at-home mom for a little while. And which I loved. I loved it. And I ended up being a stay-at-home mom for the whole my kids' whole, time at home. Um, and it's also really, really hard. And and moms don't really share how hard it is a lot of times, Everybody kind of has this idea that if you talk about how hard it is to be with toddlers all day long, every day, that you're a bad mom or you don't love your kids or, something's wrong with you. And so I struggled with that. And at the same time that I was deciding to stay home, so I left this kind of career and this image of myself that I was this like, go getter. I was going to have it all. I was that generation that's like, they broke the glass ceiling so that I could have it all. Right. And then I decided to stay at home. So there was some conflicting feelings around that. And then suddenly I was home alone all day with babies because then I had my second daughter. They're 2 years apart. And this is the same time that my husband's career was really taking off. And so we moved overseas for the first time as a family. We went and lived in Seoul, Korea as expats. And I think that our expat experience is a big part of my story because, again, it's about the guardrails. We moved to Seoul. My husband was working all the time. The thing about working in Asia is that if you want to have calls with the US, you have to do them at night. So he would be at work all day, then he'd come home and be on calls in the evening. And so he was very absent. And I was with the kids all the time, and I had to find friends, and I had to figure things out, and I had to do it all in a foreign country by myself. And, not that he wasn't supportive, but he just wasn't physically available to do it with me. And so it was hard. And I found community with other women that were going through the same thing that also like to drink. So then it became this like way to manage all of that stress of being in a foreign country and not having familial support around. And I loved my experience in Seoul. I still look back at it as some of the best years ever. But there was a lot of loneliness. There was a lot of unknown. There was a lot of just party atmosphere. I mean, the thing about living overseas is that, in a lot of countries, Asia in particular, it's very affordable to have household help. So suddenly I had very affordable childcare. We had a woman, a lovely woman, her name was Jocelyn, that she was with us a lot. Like she didn't live with us, but she was available all the time and she helped me with the house and she helped me with the kids. And so here I am, I'm in Seoul. I can't work. I didn't really want to work, but I couldn't even if I wanted to. I've got all this time, I've got childcare, and I've got a bunch of women friends that are in the same boat and want to drink with me. So I did a lot of drinking there. And that's kind of when it started to escalate. At first, it was fun, but that was when I can remember the first like waking up in the middle of the night thinking like this is getting out of control, Ellen. Like this is not going in a good direction. It was when I first started like making sure I had wine. Like I wanted to have I only felt secure if I knew I had like 3 or 4 bottles in the closet so that I could, get them if I needed them. Um, and I think that's kind of when it first really started going off the rails for me.
So you're in Seoul, you're living you're living as an expat, not like an expat. You're actually an expat. And you start to notice that I feel uneasy if I don't have a stock of booze on hand. And you're starting to notice that like, whoa, this is something I'm doing quite a lot.
Mhm.
So where did your alcohol journey take you after that?
Well, I lived in that space for the next, see, we moved to Seoul when Abby was 6 months old, and I first took my first break when she was 17. So I spent 15 to 17 years in that space of worrying about my drinking escalating, my drinking becoming more and more a secret. Everybody always knew I drank. My family knew I drank, my friends, like I was known as a fun party girl. Um, but also responsible. Like nobody ever said to me, very few exceptions where anybody said to me anything like, well, you had a lot last night, or do you think you're over drinking? Nobody ever, which was a point of pride for me. And it was something I protected. Like I said, I needed to be seen as responsible and capable and in control. And so what was going on internally with me was very secret. I didn't share it with my husband. I didn't share it with friends. I shared bits and pieces with my sister. But I felt incredibly alone. And I started the journey of like, okay, I got to get control on this. I started making rules for myself. I started saying, okay, I'm only going to drink on the weekends, and that wouldn't work. Okay, maybe I'll switch to white wine was my thing. I love white wine, and it would go down like water. Like it would, I mean, it just the first glass would, I mean, everyone would joke about my first glass of anything. It would always go down really, really fast. But white wine was like, I knew if I opened a bottle of white wine, I was going to be finishing it. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll drink beer. I'll get fuller faster with beer. Or maybe I'll drink red wine because I don't drink it quite as fast. There was a point where I switched to like vodka and soda because I had heard that that had less sugar, but it didn't give me the same buzz. Like I didn't like that buzz that much. Thank goodness, because that would have been a dangerous road to go down probably. Um, but yeah, I mean, I have a journal entry from 8 years before I first took a break that it just makes me cry to read it. I mean, I don't have it with me right here, but it said something like, I need to change. I love my life. I'm going to lose this life. Like what is wrong? Everything is great. Why can't you stop drinking? What is wrong with you? We need to figure this out. But at the same time, it was so hard for me because I also could not imagine a life without alcohol. And I just couldn't imagine it. So as much as I wanted to drink less, it terrified me, the idea of giving up drinking, because I didn't know who I would be. I didn't really know any non-drinkers. I had curated a life full of drinkers. Those were the people I sought out. Those were the people I spent time with. And we as a couple, like Chris, my husband, we would drink together, he and I, we would socialize drinking. And I mean, he went through periods where he drank a little bit more, but he's never been a big drinker the way I am. And talk about guardrails, he couldn't. He had evening calls for like much of his career. So he couldn't really drink during the week. And um, yeah, so it was like a gradual sort of escalation. But, the first time I ever got a book about alcohol, I think it was between the time that I had Anna and the time that I had Abby. Like I already, because I remember having the thought, Chris and I wanted to get pregnant again and have a second child, and I was like, oh yeah, it's probably a good thing to get pregnant again because my drinking's, it's kind of escalating. Like that'll really help me, scale back. And thank God, yeah, being pregnant, I had no desire to drink. Something magical happens when you're pregnant, at least it did to me. So thank goodness. But then as soon as she was born, that was a very temporary guardrail. It just all came back.
So, wow, I didn't realize that there was like that your consideration of or looking for resources to deal with your drinking spanned that entire time. Like not only your entire time as an expat, but like to pre that to between your two kids, which are only 2 years apart. So
Mhm.
um, talk to me about your evolution with that. Because at some point you picked up a book and then went back to drinking, but then you later on would find other programs, do other stuff. So like you've been working on it for some time. What was working on your alcohol like for you, and what was the trajectory of that?
I was interested in figuring out how to stop drinking or drink less. Actually, drink less. I didn't want to stop drinking. I wanted to find a way to drink less. And so I sought out books and resources, and I would, Google, am I an alcoholic? What can I do? And I didn't want to do AA. I knew I didn't want to do AA because at AA you can't drink. you know, and plus the stigma of it. And I didn't want to admit I didn't never thought of myself as an alcoholic. I was afraid of that word. Um, and because I'm a little bit older than you are, back in the day that I was looking at this, there were no resources. Like Annie Grace, her work is in the last 10 years. So I was starting to question my drinking starting, 20 years ago. So all there was AA. So I was in the space of being like, I really know this is a problem. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't want to stop drinking. I just want to drink less. But the only option I can see is AA and stopping drinking or continue as I am. And everybody's telling me I'm fine. I look really not that much different than everybody I hang out with. And I thought it was only me who was waking up in the middle of the night, like regretful, beating myself up, mad that I drank too much. I thought it was only me that was like sneaking wine at 4 o'clock when the kids were having their snack after school and feeling incredibly ashamed. I also was a part of that mommy wine culture time when they first started advertising heavily towards moms. That was right, I mean, the perfect storm for me. So suddenly it was very acceptable to get together with other moms and have mommy play dates and mommy's, sippy juice and all the things. So it was like confirmation bias on the one hand that I'm okay, this is what we all do, like, no problem. This is like the sophisticated new way to be a mom, like I fed into that. But then at 3 in the morning, I would be like, this is not okay. Like, I know this is not okay. But I didn't have anywhere to take it. I didn't want to burst that bubble of like Ellen's got it all together, the facade of responsible, in control person. So I did all this in secret. I mean, I remember getting books and hiding them from my husband, like terrified that somebody would like see something and then ask me about it, because I didn't see a way out. So it was really lonely and it was really scary. And I think that's part of why, I mean, this is such a crazy thing for me to be doing a podcast with you and talking openly about this, because this was my biggest, most shameful secret that it's going to make me tear up, that I carried for 15 years, not having anyone to talk to about it. And it was really hard. And I had such a good life. I had a really loving husband. I had beautiful children that were great and adored me and thought I was the best. And I was drinking every day. Like I had so much shame around that. Like what was wrong with me? And so when I first encountered, I mean, it was just like a fluke. Something came across my Instagram from Sober Sis, and she spoke openly about her drinking on this Instagram. And I was like, and I related to what she was saying. Like, I was like, oh my God, she sounds like me. Like, I literally at that point thought I was the only one. And and I joined her 21-day program, which was amazing. It was transformative for me. This was, 3.5 years ago. And I loved her program, and it was the first time that I met other women that experienced the same thing. I felt the same way, and And she had a whole coaching program that I could have joined, but she has a religious angle for her coaching, and I'm just not a religious person. Like, I think she's wonderful and the work she's doing is wonderful, but I didn't resonate with that side of it. And she referenced Annie Grace and This Naked Mind a lot in her work. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the source. So I looked up her work, and they just happened to be offering at that time. They don't do this anymore, but they had a 90-day path program, because I don't know that I would have committed at that point to a year-long program. I did that 21 days alcohol free. That was the first 21 days alcohol free I had had since my pregnancy with Abby 17 years prior. Like, I had tried many a dry January and not succeeded. I had tried many a Monday through Thursday and not succeeded. I mean, I had not, so I had my first success. I felt great. Then that program ended, and I drank again because, I just didn't have the tool. I didn't know that I didn't want to drink. Like, I still wanted to drink. I just wanted to drink less. So, but I experienced for the first time, like, how good it felt to not drink. Like, not just physically, like the better sleep and the more energy but the, like, the pride I would feel, like, waking up in the morning knowing I didn't drink. Like, I had not experienced that in 15 years, you know? And And just I knew I wanted more of that, but I wasn't, I didn't know how to have more of it really. And so that then I found this 90-day program with Annie Grace, and she it was great. I mean, I learned that's when I really got my first experience of coaching, like, it was group coaching, and I had fabulous coaches, and I had my first ever alcohol-free Thanksgiving. I had my first ever alcohol-free Christmas. I wasn't alcohol free through that whole 3 months, but I had periods, and they were encouraging me in that time to experiment, and I was questioning my beliefs, and I was paying more attention to why I drank and what were my triggers, and getting experience not drinking, and, like, understanding what that was like for me, and it was amazing. But after 90 days, like, I joke, I wasn't fully cooked yet. Like, I had gotten so many gains, but I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do yet. So I drank and I didn't drink and I drank and I didn't drink for the next year. And in that year, I did some one-on-one coaching. I had a therapist too, which for the first time, I was actually being honest with my therapist. So I had had therapists in the past, but never would talk about my drinking because I didn't want them to judge me. I didn't want them to think I was a terrible mom. So I never really got very far in my therapy because it's all tied up. So for the first time, I, like, was started to share the real honest truth to the coaches and then to my therapist. And yeah, I had a lot of alcohol-free time and a lot of drinking time in that year. It was a year of exploration, but it was a year, like, I felt empowered again, like I was choosing, sort of. Like, I had a taste of choosing, but I still wasn't free, you know? Um And then summer came, and kind of things went off the rails again. Like, I live in northern Michigan in the summertime, and it's like beach and barbecues and patio drinking, and I just started drinking a lot again, but felt so crappy and knew the difference now. And I was like, I want more of what I was getting before. And so then I joined a year-long path program with This Naked Mind. And within a couple of months of that program, I had my last drink, and I've been alcohol free ever since. And for me, it took a lot of exploration, a lot of experimentation, a lot of back and forth. I was not convinced I wanted to give up alcohol. I was not convinced I wanted to give up alcohol until I gave it up, to be honest. Like, I was still kind of searching for a way to keep it in my life until I finally recognized that I don't like it in my life. Like, my life is so much better without it. But I didn't that wasn't where I started at all. Like, I fought hard to keep it in my life for a long time. And when I finally, like, accepted that, what if I just, that question, like, what if your life is better just without it? Is that possible? Because that seemed so impossible. So then I, leaned into that and was like, well, let's find out. So I did a 30-day challenge, which extended to a 60-day challenge, which extended to 100 days. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to try 6 months. And then at 6 months, I was like, okay, I'm going to try a year. And then after a year, I was like, yeah, there's no way in hell I'm going back. This is so much better.
That's beautiful. So, when you had your last drink, you were in the path. Do you
Mhm.
remember your last drink? Was it like this is my last drink, or was it just like a drink that you had and it turned out to be your last?
I think what happened, there was another woman in the path who's become one of my best friends. And she had reached out to me. She messaged me privately and was just like, because I shared a lot, in coaching calls and in the community feed. She's like, I think that, like, do you want to just take a break together? Because you sound like you're ready to take a break because everything I was saying was like I kept drinking, but then I was miserable. And so she's like, I kind of want to take a break. Do you want to just like do a few days, just us? We don't have to make it a big part of the big group, just support each other for a few days. And we did that, which was amazing. And then we both drank again a little bit. And then we were coming up on a group 30-day challenge in the path. And I had my last drink like 3 days before that challenge started because I think I was just like so over it. And I just was like, because my mentality up till then was sort of like, well, drink up until the last minute, babe. Like you may never drink again, right? But I had to get rid of that mentality and just be like, that's a 30-day challenge. I can drink again after that, whatever. And I don't want to wait 3 days because I'm sick of feeling like shit. And so I didn't know it would be my last drink. No way. Like I thought it might be my last drink for 30 days, but I had no idea it was going to be my last drink ever.
Yeah. I know for me, the experience of figuring out the whole alcohol thing was like deeply understanding myself and the reasons I was drinking and things like that. And you mentioned that experience of learning so much about yourself, and especially for those breaks around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and for the whole year um, leading up to the summer, which then led into the year long path. And so, like that whole time, what are some of the things that you learned were undergirding your relationship with alcohol?
Oh gosh, where to begin? I mean, I really felt like alcohol was the thing that was making everything better. I thought it was making my relationships better, my relationship with my husband, my relationship with friends, my relationship with my sister. I thought it made me a better mom, that it made me more relaxed. I mean, it's laughable now that drinking alcohol every day would make me a better mom. But, I convinced myself somehow that it was okay. Um, I I had given alcohol so much credit for so many things that it wasn't until I experimented with doing the thing that I believed could not be done without alcohol and seeing that it was actually the thing that I really liked. Like, and sometimes I would do the thing without alcohol and be like, "Oh my God, I hate this thing." So it was that kind of a learning. Like I think I was using alcohol to elevate. I believed I was elevating all the experiences, right? And so to have the discovery that the experience, like, okay, let me just give an example. Like that first Thanksgiving, alcohol free for me, I remember I had a coaching call and I was like, I just couldn't imagine it. Thanksgiving without alcohol, like it did not compute. And my coach was just like, "What do you love about Thanksgiving?" And I mean, other than getting to drink at first thing in the morning when I started cooking, like, other than that, Ellen, what do you like about Thanksgiving? And it was like, oh, I love spending time with my girls. I love the food. I love that it's a holiday that actually doesn't revolve around gifts because that's always stressful for me. It's just about food, which I love. I like kind of the playfulness of cooking and dancing around the kitchen with my girls, all these things that I loved. And my coach was like, well, what if that's what you love about Thanksgiving? And it's not the fact that you get to drink at 10 a.m. on Thanksgiving. And, I just really played around with that. Like, is that possible? And And then I experienced it, and it was I had a whole plan. I had the AF stuff and the regular stuff, and I was like, he encouraged me to delay as a tactic. Like if I normally start drinking at 10 a.m. on Thanksgiving, like just wait until noon and then check in with yourself and see if you want it or need it. And then wait until 2 and check in with yourself again. And so I just kind of did that all day. And I kept being like, yeah, I think I'm okay. Like, I don't, I was curious, I wanted to find out, like, could I actually do it? And so by the end of it, I didn't have anything to drink and I ended up having a really nice time. Like, I felt really connected to my kids. I tasted and enjoyed and remembered the food because, I mean, the food's the best thing about Thanksgiving. But by the time the food was served, I had already had a bottle plus of wine. So I wasn't even tasting it. And I didn't care about it anymore. I was just like, where's the wine? So that was kind of, and then I remember it was a lot, it's a lot to be with family all day, cooking all day. And so I was kind of tapped out at the end of dinner. And I remember I was like, you know what? I'm going to go on a walk by myself and decompress. And like, that was revelatory for me. Like, that I could do that. I could like go do something by myself and that was what I wanted to do. Like it surprised me that that's what I wanted in that moment. And then I remember the next morning waking up and being like, oh my God, it's the day after Thanksgiving and I'm not hungover. And, like, so it was like this experience of like, wow, I had a really nice day yesterday and I feel good this morning. Because for me, it was always a trade-off, It was like, okay, I can move and have a blast of an evening, but the next morning is going to be ruined. Or if I have something important in the morning, I'm no fun in the evening, right? Like I can't drink too much. So that's no fun. That's how I equated it. So to have like a good day and a good night and a good morning, it was just like, oh, okay, that like evidence, we talk about data points. That was a humongous data point for me. And it just piqued my curiosity. I had more and more experiences like that. But it wasn't up and to the right. It wasn't like I had that Thanksgiving and it was over. I remember I had like a 45-day streak of alcohol free. And then it was my wedding anniversary. And then I was like, I can't do that without alcohol. So I still very clearly had a belief around like celebration, romance, time with my partner. We got married in Napa. We have special wine. So I had to work through that belief. So I had a lot of beliefs around the importance of alcohol at certain events. I also used alcohol a lot to manage my overwhelm, or I thought it was helping me manage my overwhelm, my exhaustion, my having to push through difficult periods, moments where I really just needed a nap and I didn't feel like I could take a nap. So I would have alcohol to like push through second shift in the evening. And I think one of the things that I realized when I removed alcohol was that I was much less overwhelmed. Like, you don't realize that, you think that alcohol is helping you with the overwhelm, but it's actually creating the overwhelm because you're just constantly tired and feeling fragile and you've got so much cognitive dissonance happening in your head. And so, yeah, I mean, countless the number of different beliefs I had to work through. And the identity piece, like, who am I if I'm not Ellen, the party girl? Like, where will I belong? Who will like me? How, I didn't even know what that would look like. So that was scary.
You mentioned the when you were working on figuring this whole stuff out and like your, you know, years long trajectory of, picking up your first piece of quit lit and then, like going years and years and then, tiptoeing around and then finally kind of like finding Sober Sis and then finding Annie Grace's work and stuff like that. I'm curious with the like um like did your family notice at Thanksgiving that you weren't partaking in drinking or like did people notice that you were kind of experimenting like you were?
Yes and no. So I had kind of a unique experience in that when this was all happening, my oldest daughter was at college and my youngest daughter, it was her senior year in high school. And we were in the process of moving back from China, but my husband was still finishing his assignment in Shanghai, and my daughter and I were living on our own in Michigan for that year. And so I kind of went under the radar. Like I got to do a lot of this experimenting and play without anybody watching or noticing or asking questions, um, which I think really helped me because I was really afraid I was not going to succeed or it wouldn't work. And but then like at Thanksgiving, for example, I told that Thanksgiving, my husband was still in Shanghai, so it was actually just the girls and I, and they were of course surprised that I wasn't drinking, but it wasn't like they were 19 and 17. So although my 19-year-old would have loved to drink with me, I'm sure, um, it wasn't like a really strange thing that I didn't drink on Thanksgiving. And then by the time my husband repatriated back, I had already been doing a lot of work on it and had been able to share that I'm really enjoying drinking less. And I'm playing around with it. I just feel better. I didn't make a whole big thing about it. I never admitted I was in a coaching program or I was asking for help. I was just like, yeah, I'm just wasn't sleeping as well. And I'm just, want to lose some weight and, like trying to keep it really loose. And because he was never a big drinker, like it wasn't that confronting for him, like, I mean, it was a little weird when we would go out and I would not have a drink and he would, but like on the regular, on the daily, I think he was kind of relieved actually, because I was always wanting to open a bottle and he didn't always want to drink. Um, it wasn't until I had 100 days alcohol free, which was in that year-long path that after I had my last drink, I got to the 100 days that I shared any of this, you know, that I opened up to my husband and told him I had been drinking a bottle of wine or more a night for years. And I mean, he knew I drank, but he didn't know how much I was suffering with it. And he didn't know the quantity, because I was very careful. I hid bottles. And like I said, he worked a lot at night. So like we would have a glass at dinner or I would have a glass at dinner. He didn't usually, but I always did. But then he would go off on calls and I think he probably just assumed I stopped after dinner, because I wasn't like an obnoxious drunk. I was a pretty tame drunk. Um, but so I think it was a real surprise, and I told my kids too, and we've had a lot of conversations about it since. And of course, they know I'm doing this podcast, and so they've learned all about it. But they were also shocked, like they were, and it was, it's been so sweet actually, because they were just like, we had no idea how much you were suffering, right? And which privately makes me so happy because that is what I was trying so hard to do. I didn't want anybody to know. But that not wanting anybody to know just kept me so isolated and alone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so relatable. Like I mean, my wife certainly knew that I was drinking a lot, but she didn't know that I was in such torment and turmoil over it, right? Like,
Mhm.
because for her, she'd have just been like, "Well, don't do it anymore." We're like, "Well, that's the point." Like, it's really hard not to. Um, so what
Exactly.
do you
Yeah.
feel like has changed or shifted in your like the relationship dynamic now that everything about this is like on Front Street?
Oh my God. It's everything. I mean, for someone who wore a mask, like many masks, for so long, to actually take the masks off and share who I am and what I'm experiencing, and to receive acceptance and love and, uh, you know, through the coaching program first, like that's really where I practiced it. And that's why I think it's so important for people to find community because like you said with your wife, with me with Chris, it's not like they have bad intentions, but because they don't drink like you and I drank, they don't how can they understand? I mean, if Chris was drinking too much, he'd just cut back. Like it wouldn't be he wasn't in the same cycle I was in. And so to be able to be surrounded by people that get it and that know how hard it is, and that's where I got my my legs. That's where I got my feet to be able to share openly, which allowed me then to share with my most intimate people, and and then to have faith that they would not turn away, because the people in the community that I had joined did not turn away. And it's the most healing thing that I've ever experienced, to be honest, like to be able to put down the masks and to be able to fully be myself and to be loved and accepted for who I am. And that's been such a huge part of my journey. And we've talked about this before, but it's like I think so much of my drinking was I got so much of my self-worth and validation from presenting as okay, from making sure that all the people that I loved were okay. And to be able to like actually be okay without needing that, like being able to show my scars and wounds and all the things, and and to know that I'm okay, like that has been the work of, that I did in the path, and the work that I did with coaches, and the work that I do with people now, because, we're drinking for a reason, right? There's something underneath that we're trying to fill with alcohol. Like we all have some kind of hole, and our holes might originate from different places, but we're all looking to fill that hole with something. And in my case, it was alcohol. It could be gambling. It could be sugar. It could be porn. It could be scrolling. But my thing was alcohol. And so doing the work to learn and understand and get the, I don't know, like the trust that I'm okay just as I am. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to present like everything's okay. That's bullshit anyway. In fact, now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm like, how boring is it when you meet people that look like they have everything okay? Like, no, thank you. I'll take a pass, right? I'd much rather talk to the people that are flawed and willing to talk about it. Like, that's interesting to me now. Um, but yeah, that self-work, that work on like, and a lot of that stuff originates in childhood, but we don't always have to go back and like do the deep therapy in the childhood. We can just be like, okay, I understand where it came from. I can see how it's showing up now. And what are the tools and the things I can do now to make myself, you know, feel okay? And that was transformative for me. And I spent all in all, I mean, and then after my 2 years with the path, I signed up for the coach training program because I just wanted more and more and more. Like, I just love this exploration of self. And it's been so healing and transformative for me.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue to my next question. So like you get this time under your belt, like you are in the middle of the path and you're like, you know what, that's my last drink. I'm stacking these days. And at what point do you start thinking like, oh, I could do this coaching thing? And like why? So I guess my first question is, when did coaching as an option for you come up, and and why?
I wasn't allowed to drive in China. So I was given a driver, and we had taxis and metro. So 6 years where I didn't have to drive. So, I mean, how many people use driving as somewhat of a guardrail? If you know you have to drive your kid to soccer practice, you're probably going to plan your drinks around when you get home. Well, I never had to drive, so I could plan my drinks for before soccer practice. It didn't matter. So my drinking was amped up, and I knew it was a problem. And I thought, okay, I need some purpose. I need something meaningful in my life. Maybe that's the trick, right? This was one of my things that I tried to stop drinking. So I had already, back in Michigan, had done similar idea, had done a master's in counseling program. I almost finished that entire program right before we moved to China. And then we got to China, and I couldn't finish that program, but I was like, okay, I really like that work. So I signed up to do a life coaching certification, which was great, amazing. I loved it. I love both of those programs. But I never completed it because I never got the traction. Like, it was like, I mean, I was drinking all the time. And so then when I went through the path program and got all that coaching, and saw how transformative it was for myself and the people in my cohort, And these coaches were like idols to me. Like I thought they were amazing. And then, realizing that I could become one was incredible. So it's even before I finished my second path year, I signed on to train to become a coach. And my biggest fear around coaching was exactly this, what we're doing right now. I'm like, I really want to help people. I know I could help people because I've lived it I know what worked for me. I know what worked for other people. I know I can share this. I've got all this training. I'm passionate about it. But oh my God, I don't want to have to say out loud how much I was drinking. Like that was my stumbling block. Like, how am I going to help people if I'm not willing to talk about my experience? And so that was a big stumbling block to get over. I'm putting together my website was like, okay, like, am I going to really put it out there on the web that I was drinking a bottle of wine a night for anyone in the world to see? My biggest, most shameful secret. So, and that's been liberating, actually. Like you said, like how it's been with my relationships, like that's a whole nother level. Like now it's just like anybody and everybody can know exactly my story. And I mean, doing this is another level too. Like I've never fully shared all of this before, certainly not recorded to be shared out in the world. Um, but I feel so passionately about it because if people that had come before me had not done it, if I hadn't heard those podcasts, if I hadn't read Annie Grace's book, if Sober Sis hadn't popped up on my Instagram, I would still be stuck. I would still be in that really terrible spiral, believing I was alone. And, sometimes it's easy to think, especially for people in this sober, curious space like we are now, like, oh, everybody knows about this, right? Like, there's so many voices. What do you and I have to offer that's different than what everybody else is saying? But then you go out in the world and you realize that everybody's still drinking and everybody still believes that alcohol or yeah, AA is the only option. I mean, these different modalities, these different frameworks, this different way to approach relationships with alcohol, I feel like it's still so I mean, this could be a revelatory conversation for someone. Hearing my story might be the first time somebody ever hears themselves in a story. And so that's why I'm doing it because God, if people hadn't done it before me, I would still be stuck.
It's like this whole healing process with figuring out alcohol is extraordinarily challenging, but it's like in the direction of our greatest fears and the greatest like things that we're reluctant to do is like that's the path of our greatest healing, right? And so being able to like bare your heart like this, to share your story, and that being like abject terror for you, but facing that down and being on the other side of it with the kind of like the purity of intention that you're bringing to it and the the genuine hope that somebody's going to recognize themselves in your story and start to get this thing figured out and discover the whole beautiful life that's waiting for them. Like it's a I don't know, it's just beautiful, and it's this work is so important. Ellen, so you're coaching now.
Mm.
What's that
Hmm.
like? And what's it like to work with you, and what kind of people do you typically coach?
Oh, it's amazing. It's for me, it's amazing. I I find that most of the people that are drawn to me are people that see themselves in my story. I do coach a lot of women, although I do coach men as well. Um, Usually it's people that are also look like they have everything together on the outside and they're quietly falling apart on the inside. I mean, I think that story right there um, is probably the most shared among my clients. Um, yeah, and I mean, I love one-on-one because we get to like really dig into like the really individual things that are going on and providing I get the chance to provide that really intense one-on-one support that sometimes people really need to get through the hump and to take those first few days alcohol free or to commit to staying alcohol free. And I offer a high touch coaching program where I'm available on the daily. I send, videos, and we have, weekly calls generally, which I just love. And then I also, because I got such a benefit from like group community coaching, I also have a small group, and I'm actually in the process of building a more of a like a membership community where you can just join monthly for as long as, it's beneficial for you. Because I want to create a space where people can feel seen and understood and share their experience and not feel alone. That is such a big part of my story, that I just felt so alone. And when I first had that recognition that there were other people like me, that helped shed so much of my shame and started the process of healing for me. And there's also so much I didn't know. I didn't know things about alcohol. I didn't know how it worked in my body. I didn't understand that I had all these beliefs that came from society, or my upbringing, or advertising, or I didn't know I could question these things. And so I love doing that, and in groups with people, so everyone can share their experience and feel seen and understood and heard and a part of something, because it's really it can be really lonely work, especially if you are working on your relationship with alcohol and the people in your life are not. So we need places where we can show up and authentically, go through this stuff together.
Totally. Ellen, if somebody wanted to learn more about you or get in touch with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
My website, which is ellenbiggscoaching.com. You and I have this podcast, obviously. So if you listen to more episodes, you'll get more of a vibe of what I'm about and what it might be like to work with me.
Last question. If you could go back in time to yourself when you were drinking more than you wanted to and finding yourself unable to stop, what message would you have for past Ellen?
I, mm, it's so hard, because I don't know what I would have heard at that point. I don't know. But I think what I would have wanted to know is that there is a way out. There is hope. Like, you don't have to be so afraid. You don't have to fear life without alcohol. It's actually flippin' amazing, like best kept secret ever. I thought it was going to be this dreadful thing, which is why I was so afraid to move towards it. And turns out we didn't even get to talk about this, but we talk about this on the podcast all the time. But just life is so much better. I'm so much more peaceful. I'm so much happier. I have more energy. I'm excited about life again. I'm not having any of this cognitive dissonance. I just have a beautiful life, and I'm enjoying my beautiful life instead of wondering why I can't enjoy it. And yeah, so I would just want her to know that there is an alternative way to AA. There's hope, it's possible, and it's worth it.
I think it's a beautiful message, Ellen. Thank you for sharing your story and your entire journey. And I know that it's going to resonate with so many people. And it's brave work doing this and talking about this, but it that's what it takes. That's what it takes, right? Like, I mean, it it makes it makes other people, it certainly made me in the past feel less alone, and when we feel less alone, we're more able to be brave ourselves. And I just admire your bravery and your vulnerability, and I'm feeling so grateful that we get to do this podcast together and to be in such wonderful company.
Thank you. And likewise. And it's so, as you were saying that, I was just making me think, like, when I was drinking every day, like, what I wanted was the easy button. I wanted things to be easy. That's all I wanted. And it was because I was so flippin' fragile all the time. I was so fragile from drinking every day. And now that I'm not drinking every day, like, easy's okay, but it's kind of like, I know that that's not where growth is. Like, it's not where, like, hard or challenging or scary is a lot more interesting to me now, And I can't do it all the time, obviously, but it's like I orient more towards that now, Easy's just
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, well, whatever.
It's the edge, right? Like, I mean, like, let's go into the
Yes.
unknown.
Yes.
Yeah, It's really
This was
fun.
definitely an edge for me today, Jonathan. So thank you for bringing me to my edge.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us and for listening to Ellen's story. If any part of it resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it. You can email us at thealcoholmyth@gmail.com. And if you want to learn more about Ellen or get in touch with her about coaching, ellenbiggscoaching.com is the best place to do that. We've been the Alcohol Myth Podcast. We're putting out new episodes every single Monday, and we'd love for you to let us know what you think. Rock us a comment and leave us a rating. And we look forward to continuing to do this vulnerable work.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for listening to my very vulnerable story. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Alcohol Myth Podcast.
If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love to hear about it.
Send your questions, stories, or ideas for future episodes to thealcoholmyth@gmail.com.
We read every message. We really do.
Take good care of yourself. We'll see you next time.